My name is Yella Trask, and I am with the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. We are sponsoring this whole space and have quite a few of our team here to help answer any questions. If you are interested in understanding a little bit better about what the state is doing to help support manufacturing. So I am so thrilled to introduce Harry. I am, like all of you, probably paying very close attention to what's happening with supply chain. And even just this morning, there was another piece about all the the shipping containers that are stuck outside of the LA dock. And I think it's the first time in my time being involved with manufacturing that your average person actually understands what supply chain means. So I am happy to introduce Harry. Harry founded the Reshoring Initiative really to try to bring back 5 million jobs, manufacturing jobs, back to the U.S. And it is a key topic at the federal level as well. And after founding the Reshoring Initiative and being president of Machine Tool Manufacturer and GF Machining Solutions for 22 years, Harry has numerous awards. They include Industry Week's Manufacturing Hall of Fame, SP's Mold Designer of the Year, I didn't know there was such a thing, and Fab Shop Director Manufacturer of the Year. He has participated very actively in President Obama's 2012 Insourcing Forum at the White House, and he's the member of the Department of Commerce Investment Advisory Council. And Harry, so this is why we're so lucky that Harry is joining us here today in Milwaukee, because he's quoted in the Wall Street Journal. He could be out there doing a whole bunch of other things, but he's here with us today. Forbes, New York Times, and seen on national TV and radio programs. Not to make it about where you've been quoted, you also have a BS and MS in engineering, so you know what you're talking about from MIT and the MBA from the University of Chicago. So with that, I will turn it over to Harry, and I'm sure he's going to look forward to any questions you might have after his presentation.
So we're going to talk about reshoring, what's happening. It is happening. It's clearly happening. I'm honored that I had at least 2 groups here that came that know me, and they came back for more, and that's great. And they told me about their companies reshoring or helping other companies reshore. So it's absolutely clear that a lot is happening. So we're going to talk about how your company and Wisconsin in general can benefit from this. I think I just got turned up a little bit. So a little more background on me, just for fun. This is New Jersey, which was settled by Europeans first in about 1660. And this is the Crane residence in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And I'm Harry Crane Moser. This is my ancestors' original house in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And one of their relatives was Stephen Crane, who wrote The Red Badge of Courage. Some of you read that in high school. It's known as the first American novel. This is my grandfather, Henry Crane. And he was born in that house. And he worked at the local gas utility, started as a plumber, retired after 67 years on the board of directors and secretary of the corporation. And his biggest customer in town was Singer Sewing Machine, okay? And in its day, when it was like I showed you there, that was 2.5 million square feet, 5,000 workers. It was the biggest factory in the world. It was before automotive plants, for example, came on. My grandfather was a foreman. My dad ran a third of the factory. I worked there summers, and I went past 20 years ago, and everything's gone. No, nothing, as far as I can tell, is made in the United States. It's something like Alice Chalmers, probably here in Alice. It's something that was huge and important to the community and the state and the country, and it's gone. And so I decided from that something had to be done. During my career, I sold machine tools and I sold foundry equipment, like to Wapaka. Some of you probably know Wapaka up here in Wisconsin. And company after company, industry after industry that I wanted to sell things to disappeared. Before I could get to them and sell them something, they were gone because foreign competition had wiped them out. And so I decided something had to be done to resolve that. So to give you a little understanding of this trend, this shows manufacturing output in the U.S. and using government statistics that are value-based rather than say, ton-based, it looks like it's plateaued. I think if you go by tons, if you go by units, it's clearly fallen off. And manufacturing share of GDP is down by 50%, so down dramatically, quite low relative to Germany and France and Italy and places like that. But we hear about this being a services society. And yes, we do consume services, but we still consume goods, things that manufacturing makes. You can see growing at 2.5% a year, so growing as fast as the GDP. So we still consume goods, we just don't make enough of them anymore. We import them. So here's our trade deficit, growing. It first turned negative around 1980, and now it averages about $900 billion a year. And that $900 billion at current levels of productivity is the 5 million jobs. So to balance the trade deficit, to get to the point where imports equals exports, would take 5 million manufacturing workers at the current levels of U.S. productivity. So that's the goal of what we want to achieve. Manufacturing jobs as a percentage of U.S. employment is down from 27% to 9%. In Germany, it's still about 20%, something like that. And if you put those last two graphs together, you can see a very strong correlation between the trade deficit and the manufacturing jobs. And when you look into it, it's crystal clear that most of the loss in jobs over the last 20, 30 years has been due to the trade deficit. Some people will say automation, but automation actually has only averaged, productivity has only increased about 1% a year for the last 10, 12 years. So it's clearly the trade deficit that has hollowed out U.S. manufacturing. So why did we get to that condition? Price. We did a survey with Plant Moran, one of the largest auditing and consulting companies, and we asked companies and distributors, why do you buy product offshore instead of sourcing it or making it here in the United States? And overwhelmingly, they said price was the reason. I can get it there so much cheaper than I can get it here. And if it wasn't price, it was something related to price, like it's not available here. But why is it not available here? Because the people who made it got put out of business by the cheap imports that were coming in. So we say that at least 70% of the decision to source offshore is due to price. And the price, unfortunately, is high. The U.S. is high relative to the other countries. Fortunately, for various reasons that I'll explain, we're starting to restore some balance to this. So reshoring, some people call it onshoring. President Obama called it insourcing. It's once again making in the country the product that for a while was made offshore and was being shipped here. That's reshoring, onshoring, insourcing. FDI, foreign direct investment, is a foreign company producing in the U.S. instead of shipping to the U.S. from offshore. So the two trends are essentially the same thing. In both cases, the company says, I'm going to be more profitable, more successful if we produce in the U.S. than if we ship to the U.S. A lot of people talk about localization. Everybody likes local lettuce and tomatoes, but it also makes sense to localize or reshore the production of manufactured goods. Nearshoring is producing in a near country. So for the U.S., that means Canada or Mexico. And my first choice is clearly the U.S., but there are products that are so labor intense and you can't automate them enough that it's either leave them in China, India somewhere, or take them to Mexico. And I'd rather have them come to Mexico than have them stay in China or India. First, they're convenient, the supply chain's better, as Yella was saying. We've got it, and it's here, we can get to it easily. And second, product coming out of Mexico on average has 40% US content. Because they buy tooling here, they buy materials here, they buy skills, whatever technology they need. And so, whereas product coming out of China has about 5% US content. And I'd much rather have 40% than 5%. Also, if we could load Mexico up well enough, then the Mexican wages would go up enough, and eventually we'd stop losing work to Mexico. Anyway, that was so the trend has been favorable. So back in 2010 when we started, you can see here the reshoring line in blue and the FDI line in red. So the sum of those two in 2010 was about 6,000. The 2017 peaked at about 180,000, driven by the Trump tax and regulatory cuts, fell off the next 2 years because of the trade war. Companies had business uncertainty. I don't know what's going to happen. This is too complicated. We don't know what's going to change the next minute. Therefore, they stopped acting. And then in 2020, it picked up. So we got to a record for reshoring. FDI continued down. So we hit last year 160,000 between the two, 160,000. And this year, projected from the first half results, will hit about 200 to 220,000 for the year. So we're going to hit an all-time record in 2021. So why did it happen? We gave all kinds of reasons why it went away. Why is it coming back? One thing, unit labor costs in China have been rising dramatically. So this chart shows the dollar cost in the US dollar cost of labor to make a thing, something. Let's say it's this. In different countries, you can see the US is in red, a bunch of other countries, and then China up there at the top. So China has had its labor cost in yuan rising at about 10 to 15% a year for 20 years. So they've gone from almost nothing, almost not worth measuring, to now being about a third or a fourth of the US level. Okay? And so even before the trade war, even before COVID, work was flowing out of China. Some went to Vietnam, Cambodia, Mexico, India, various places. Some came to the US. But clearly that's an important part of the trend. Other reasons, e-commerce, I put up here Amazon. When you order something from Prime, you expect it today or tomorrow. And if enough of you order it, enough of us order it today, the distribution center is going to stock out. And if they have to get replenished by surface freight on an unexpected surge, that can be normally 4 weeks. Today it could be 10 weeks for all you know, and they can't afford to be stocked out for months at a time. So whereas if your factory is 10 miles away, 50 miles away, 1,000 miles away in the US, and you can deliver to them in a week or 2 weeks, a dramatically different solution for the company. So e-commerce is important. Automation. It hasn't had as much impact as we'd like so far, but it has the potential to make the U.S. much more competitive. So we'd love to see a lot more automation, a lot more U.S. competitiveness. Minimum order quantity. There's a tendency for the Chinese especially to want to ship a container load of the same object, whereas a local U.S. company is likely to ship less than truckload, some quantity coming in once a day, once a week, just in time. Increasingly, the consumer prefers a made in USA product. To the extent that they do that, that's an incentive for companies to go. Lean. Any of you do lean at your company? Lean? No lean? So one of my neighbors is Jim Womack, who's one of the most famous lean guys. And he talks about lean shoring and says when you bring the work back, do not put it in the same factory with the same equipment, with the same people, with no more training, but work on the flow, work on the automation, train the people better, engage the workers to make sure you get a much more productive workforce. Because if you throw it back and try and do it the same way, it's going to go away again. So the pandemic has had a major impact on this. On television, starting in March, we saw people every night, the nurses and the doctors saying, I can't get masks, I can't get gowns, I can't get gloves, we're going to die here. I'm washing this stuff out at night and wearing it again the next day. And because we didn't have sufficient production capacity here, because we were so dependent on offshore for the products. And so everybody's come to accept the fact that for medical, the US has to reshore and become self-sufficient. Combination of things like PPE, but also penicillin and all these other pharmaceuticals. And the country and industry is starting to realize that the same applies to other sectors of the economy. So for example, rare earth minerals, the 5G, we're trying to find a solution to, electronic devices of various kinds, the chips, everybody's heard about the chips. Even the Defense Department, every year or two puts out a report that says, here are the products and the materials that we cannot get in the United States, and we have to get some from our allies, but some we get from China or Russia or somewhere else where we don't want to have to be dependent on to get them. So increasingly, industry as a whole, society as a whole, understands that something has to be done. Here's one, I've got a dozen surveys I could put up. Here's one fairly recent from April, suggesting how high fixing the supply chain is as a priority for companies planning to reshore a significant percentage, and listing some of the industries that are the most likely or the highest priority that decide to bring it back. So you put all this together, and the senior management, the board of directors, the supply chain people at companies think about what's happened in the last 10 or so years. So we've had the Fukushima tsunami, messed things up for a while. We had the Thai floods, the Chinese COVID pandemic. We had an Icelandic volcano that stopped air freight from coming in for weeks and messed up deliveries. We had the Suez Canal mess. We had our own LA dock strike. All these things cause disruptions to the supply chain, and companies look and say, I've got my assembly plant in the U.S., but I cannot get the product in from offshore. So it starts to make more sense to keep your factory in the U.S. to supply the U.S. and to bring your supply chain as close as you can. Like the Japanese come over here. Toyota builds an assembly plant, and they bring suppliers in. They're all sitting within a mile or something of the assembly plant, so it's easy to move. Every hour, products coming in. So we say the logical thing: have your assembly plant here, bring your suppliers as close as you can get them to the assembly plant. I mean, ideally, if right within Wisconsin, or if necessary within the United States or North America, but you avoid all those problems associated with getting across the ocean and subject to all the geopolitical risks otherwise. But companies will say, the chief financial officer will say, yes, I'm worried about that. I can't sleep at night because of disruption, but the U.S. is just too expensive. There's such a big price difference between China, India, Mexico, and the U.S. that I can't afford to bring it back. And we respond, if you use total cost of ownership, TCO, then you'll find in many cases that that's not true. So it turns out that about 60% of companies look only at the wage rate or only at the ex works or FOB price, rather than looking at even landed costs or all the other costs that should be included. So when they do the math correctly, you get a result that looks something like this. You can see the red circle is the Chinese price at 70. The blue triangle is the U.S. price at 100. So there's a $30 difference, 30% difference. So the procurement person looks at that and says, I'm going to buy 12,000 of those a year. That's $360,000 of purchase price variance by buying it off from China instead of buying it here. That's a third of my objective. I'm going to get my bonus. I'm going to get promoted. Of course, we'll send it off to China to get it there. But if they do TCO and see that for China it's 98 and US it's 108, now there's only a 10% difference. Now it's not so clear. And assuming that the wage trends and currency trends in the two countries continue, in a couple of years the TCO will be higher from China than from the US, then hopefully the company will say, the work that's over there, the new work that's coming out, we should not send abroad, because if we do, we're going to bring it back in a couple of years, and there's a transition cost to bring it back. And the work that's over there, we should be planning to hire and train and find local suppliers so that we can bring it back here, because strategically, over the next couple of years, it makes sense to bring the work back to the US. So to quantify that, the blue line is a statistical representation for the first 180 cases we had where the users had used our TCO estimator online and compared China to the US. And so the horizontal axis is the China price as a percentage of the US price. So at 100, they're equal. At the peak in the blue curve at 70%, the Chinese price is 70% of the US price. So on average, US price is 40% higher than Chinese. It's a big number. It's understandable that companies go abroad to get it. The red line is total cost of ownership, and the yellow line is total cost of ownership if there's a 15% Trump tariff. And you can see that the percentage of the cases to the right of 100% vertical line is 8% for blue. So in 8% of the cases, U.S. wins on price. In 32%, the U.S. wins on total cost, and 46% if there happens to be a Trump tariff in place. So just by doing the math correctly, a dramatic increase in the work that makes sense to be done in the United States. So as an elevator speech, I say 20 to 30% of what most companies import, they would bring back if they did the math correctly. So here's one example. Anchor in Elroy in Wisconsin brought jobs back. Walmart has, I'm part of a group that's helping them bring work back to the United States, and they're committed to it, and Anchor's part of that effort. Here's another case in Wisconsin, cookware. So things that you think of as consistently brought in from offshore. I did a presentation, a webinar last week for the Swiss American Business Council in Chicago, and Tornos got up. Tornos makes Swiss lathes, high precision, high production Swiss lathes, and they've decided as part of their marketing strategy to go after reshoring, to show companies how when they use the right technology with the right training, properly tooled, et cetera, that the companies can be productive enough and competitive enough to bring the work back to the United States. So they've decided to make that part of their marketing strategy in the United States. You can see more here of how they're actually going about doing that. My favorite case of reshoring is an EMS company. So they make printed circuit boards and electronic assemblies. This Mori Corp located in Woodridge, Illinois. And there's two interesting stories. First, they had a quality issue with the housing, and their customer, might have been CAT, somebody like that, said, you've got to fix this. You can't let that happen to us again. And they found a local US supplier, fixed the quality problem. Mori went in later and compared their inventory levels with the local just-in-time supply versus the once a month the container supply, and their inventory was down by 94%. Can you imagine going back to your company or your customer and say, I've got a solution to cut inventory by 94%. Now, it's not average going to be 94, but even a 50% reduction in inventory with just as good or better availability, that'd make you a hero and perhaps be enough to justify the reshoring. The second thing that happened with Mori, they came to me about 5 years ago, and they were about to lose a big order. And the VP sales, Tony, said, Harry, I need your help. So what are we going to do? And so I helped Tony do the TCO calculation, and he took it to show his customer that even though Mori's price was higher to the customer, the total cost was lower. And I've got a letter from Tony saying that was the key to winning a $60 million order. Okay, so I'd love to help you do $1 million order, or $100,000 order. So find some opportunities to apply the tool. Call on my help if you need it, and let's emulate what Mori has done. So from a societal perspective, I think of manufacturing jobs as the best solution to most of the biggest U.S. problems. Last year we saw riots and problems in disadvantaged inner city populations, understandable concerns, and I saw a gang leader from one of the big cities, and he was being interviewed in jail, and they said, why did you go into gangs? He said $12 an hour. What do you mean $12 an hour? I could not find a job that would pay me $12 an hour so I could eat. And so I went in the gang. And right now, apprentice programs are probably starting at $13, $14, $15 an hour with a great career ahead. So it can be a great solution for people. At the same time, we've seen the opioid addiction in the white rural populations where the city company shut down, and these people have nowhere to work, nothing to live on. And so bring them back. Budget deficits. So it looks like we're going to have budget deficits going on forever. But if you bring enough jobs back and companies are booming and paying taxes, everything's better. We can have both an increase in productivity and more manufacturing employment. We don't have to worry about the robots are going to take all our jobs because there'll be enough work to do. I mentioned there recruitment. How many of you have issues of recruitment? Can't find enough manufacturing workers, skilled people? You know, everybody has that problem. And one reason is because society has believed that all the work was going offshore. So why would you want to come into an industry that probably is going to shut down like the one across the street just shut down 5 years ago? So by showing your society, your city, your town, that manufacturing is coming back, not going to China anymore, but coming back from China and India and places like that, should be a lot easier to bring people in. How many of you are familiar with the concept of ESG, environmental, social, and governance? You know, a very popular subject for investments and such now. So I've listed here how reshoring, how bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. significantly benefits all three of those. In environment, it's clear. The Chinese use an awful lot of dirty coal for making their electricity. So I did a study of an aluminum die casting produced there and shipped here versus produced here. And the CO2 emissions were cut by 25 to 50% just by making the decision to source it here in the United States instead of there. Same thing for social issues, you know, fixing our middle class, the forced labor issues, et cetera. So we advocate, you know, mainly we go out and sort of help companies get this done, but we advocate with the government to change their policies. So this is I call the competitiveness toolkit. So it's tools that the government could use to make better decisions and fix the imbalance, fix the trade deficit. So skilled workforce is always my number one issue because you need it both for the quantity and competitiveness. And we need to be more like Germany and Switzerland, where 60% of the kids in Switzerland and Germany go into apprenticeships at the age of 16. You know, we don't do that. We need to do that. And this shows in the third column approximately how much price advantage I think we'd get if we implemented that. So skilled workforce, value-added tax, get the dollar down, less regulations. Collectively, maybe 51%. I know we're not going to do all that. And this chart shows, by looking at the area under those graphs that I showed you, what happens if you shift the curve a little bit over in the third and fourth columns, how much we have to get the price down to achieve a number of millions of jobs brought back. So to me, 3 or 4 of those actions, including skilled workforce, and we could have 5 million jobs brought back. It can't happen immediately because you can't get those 5 million workers recruited and trained immediately. It's going to take a cultural change. It's going to take 20 years to get it done, 30 years to get it done. But if you don't start now, this is just going to keep getting worse instead of better. So the things that we offer to help deal with this, we offer the TCO estimator. So I've told you about that. It's free online. You'll go in, you sign up, you sign in with your password, and you use it. You know, it's free, and it's secure. It's confidential. We'll go out and help big companies. Like if there was some big company here that says, Harry, we're thinking about it, but we can't quite get the decision, we'll help you do that. We have the import substitution program. I'll describe that. We have the supply chain gaps program, where we could help Wisconsin identify the product categories that make the most sense to bring back to Wisconsin, and then tell them who the biggest foreign suppliers are, and entice them to come over here and build a factory in Wisconsin. So for the import substitution program, the idea is that a company here, that can tell us something that they make especially well. I'm really good at these. I'm good at shafts. I'm good at housings, bearings, you know, pumps, whatever it is. Really good at that. And we can tell you, we can train you on total cost of ownership, and then identify the biggest importers, the companies that are shipping in millions, that are bringing in tens of millions of dollars worth of those products, and tell you who that importing company is, their address, what they're bringing in, the tons per year they're bringing in, some idea what they're paying for them, who the offshore suppliers are, and then your company uses the TCO estimator to go to those companies and convince them to buy from you instead of continuing to import. Right? And so we can do it directly for you, or for if say you're a machine tool maker or automation supplier, we can work with you to help you convince the biggest importers to invest here, or to maybe place the work with a local Wisconsin company to do the production. So for the show here, we have a door prize. And it's been promoted some, but it's the import substitution program. So we're looking for companies to submit for that. We're going to pick one company for one product. And what you have to do is fill out the import substitution input form. If you go to our website, look up import substitution, you can find it. And then email it to me and to Jay Partington here. And you have to be, the manufacturing has to be done in Wisconsin. You know, it can't be Illinois, can't be Texas, certainly can't be Mexico. You know, has to be done here in Wisconsin. You have to have attended, somebody from the company has to have attended the show. You can be either a job shop, you know, making something for other people, or you can be an OEM making pumps, motors, you know, whatever it is. It helps to be more specialized because then we can focus on something to help you. You have to apply by the end of October, and we'll announce a winner by the end of November. So if this fits, if you're interested, get back to me. You can get my card. You can find Jay. We hope you do it. Something that happened recently. For the last 4 years, we've had the National Metalworking Reshoring Award. And so if you've reshored, either with what we offer or in general, if you've reshored, you can apply for that to win. And so here's the Acme Alliance. It's an Illinois company. It's a die caster. And they won the award. It was announced at FabTech, the big metal forming show down in McCormick Place 3 weeks ago. And here I've been recognizing their success. A great company, interesting story. They've got factories in the US and Brazil and China. And in each case, they only produce in the country for the country. They don't ship from China here, they don't ship from here to China. But they're efficient enough, competitive enough, lean enough that they can produce in the country for the country and been extremely successful. So strategic thinking. Now, if you make a product and your main focus, we have to be the lowest price product. We sell by being low. Nothing else matters. You probably ought to keep offshoring. I'm probably not going to be able to overcome that. But if you're concerned about fastest delivery, about quality, about the best technology, about protecting your intellectual property, about ESG that I talked about, then you should at least evaluate domestic. And we don't think you're going to bring it all back, but 20%, 30% would be a reasonable target. So some scenarios of what I think is going to happen. The $800 billion per year trade deficit, $900 billion maybe this year, plus multi-trillion-dollar budget deficits is unsustainable. As a country, we cannot go on with that indefinitely. And therefore, something will change. And we say the right thing to change is reshoring because it'll fix both of those problems. And so we recommend here what should be done. But there's at the moment, a limit. If we tried to bring back, say, 300,000 manufacturing jobs a year, that would require a 1 or 2% increase in U.S. manufacturing employment at a time when we're projected to have millions of shortages of manufacturing workers. So we can't bring it back as fast as I'd like, even if all of you made the right decisions. So the government needs to get involved in training programs, and companies have to be committed to training programs. My forecast is the industries I show there will boom in reshoring. We're starting to see an industrial policy. The U.S. in the past has been very laissez-faire. The market will decide. The government shouldn't. And we say the government should not pick industries, but it should make the U.S. competitive enough so that industries can succeed. ESG is helping to make this happen. It looks like there's going to be 2 trading blocks, the U.S. and China. And so companies are going to be more hesitant to source from China because of possible decoupling. So this year looks like 250,000 jobs going back. So President Biden is interested in this general subject, and he has a goal of 5 million manufacturing jobs, same number that we've been. And so I'm pleased with that. He has a series of proposals here you can see that we read about all the time in the newspaper. And we think the ones you see here will be good for U.S. manufacturing, good for reshoring. The 50 billion training program especially good. But there's some that I think will hinder reshoring, like Treasurer Yellen keeps talking about a strong U.S. dollar. And that implies higher, same or higher, when we need to get it down by 20 or 30%. They want a higher corporate tax rate, and it should be the same or lower. They want to get rid of right to work. Want to make college free. Well, if college is free and you can study whatever you want to study, then who's going to go out and become a welding apprentice? You know, more fun to go to college. He doesn't seem to think, he seems to think only of OEMs and big companies, not about outsourcing. He doesn't think about the job shop, and the job shop is a huge percentage of the U.S. manufacturing. So I see a lot of pluses and minuses. I'm glad to have the pluses, but I do not see a focus on improving price competitiveness. So if he doesn't do that, then any work that comes back won't stay here because the company eventually will decide it's not competitive. So this is, I think, a nice quote that says that it's not the disruption that determines the supply chain impact, it's the supply chain that determines the impact of the disruption. Okay, so you've got to pick the right supply chain if you want to avoid disruption. So a couple things I wanted to mention. The company that gets that award, the door prize we talked about, also gets a Manufacturing is Cool t-shirt. Right? I might even be convinced to throw in two. And these are made in the United States out of U.S. cotton. Okay? So just think about this as an additional incentive to apply. I also wanted to thank one of the attendees here, Gontran Kenwood. Gontran, stand up for me. Gontran is a volunteer to us, and he's been helping us revise the TCO estimator to make it even better. So I thank you for attending today and for all the work you've done. Thank you. So we're a nonprofit. We've got 32 sponsors. You can see them here. AMT puts on IMTS, the big machine tool show. You know, trade associations, companies, all kinds of groups. And I especially wanted to thank Aptex. So Aptex is one of your exhibitors here today, and they're our newest sponsor, and we're working with them to help get the reshoring message out in Wisconsin. So I'm honored to have their support.